"What do you think?" Guy asked me. We were back in my office. We'd hurried to Century Antiques immediately after Tony had released us, and I'd just managed to sketch some of the cult symbols before a fuming Bob Craiglander had come along with a bucket of white paint. The gooseneck lamp was on, throwing a bright spotlight onto my desk, where all our clues to this point were laid out. Several samples of Hamlet Merchant's computer paper, carefully labeled by Cami, lay neatly in rows. My eyes scanned Guy's photos of the Trebleclef gang symbol, along with the sketch of the downtown original, crumpled up by Tony, but now smoothed out. The bread wire tying the button, and a little white scrape of paper from the center. Next to these was my open sketchbook with quick drawings of the Century Antiques occult symbols. "What do you mean, what do I think?" I asked Guy. "Is he guilty?" "Tony? Doesn't sound like it." "You can't tell, though." I shrugged. "He's scared, that's for sure. Where do we go from here?" I stared morosely at our clues. "We could do some thinking about the occult signs." "What do they mean?" "Who knows? Do you have any books downstairs that might help?" "Hmm." I got to my feet. "Good idea. Let's check it out." Downstairs we soon faced a shelf of books on witchcraft and sorcery. We skimmed through them looking for symbols, but weren't having much luck, until I pulled down an old thick volume not too far from Sir James Frazer's The Golden Bowl, a study in magic and religion. I held the old book's spine in my left hand, turned the edges of the pages up toward me, and the book split open to a glossy old photo of symbols. "Guy, look!" We stared down at the page. "That's them," he said. "Somebody could have stood right here and sketched these, or traced them." He looked at me. "Again, it could be anybody. Tony, Shirley Logan, anyone." "Well, let's take this upstairs." And soon we were back in my office, with the old book now among the clues. When we were settled down again, Guy asked, "Where's God in all this?" "I don't think God is in this." "Don't play games, Mark. Why isn't he getting involved?" "Who says he isn't?" Guy looked at me a long time as if I were crazy. "Look, buddy," he finally said, "you believe God has more power than anything else, right?" "No." "No?" "No. There's one thing God doesn't have power over, and that's human choice." Guy frowned. "You mean God just lets things happen and doesn't do anything about them?" "I didn't say that. God often steps in when we mess things up." "But not always." "Yeah." I reached out and began to play with the little white scrap of paper we'd found upstairs at the center. When God invented people, he gave them free choice. If I choose to ride a motorcycle without a helmet, it's not fair to expect God to cushion my head if I get thrown. Guy's voice took on a hard edge. "But what if I'm an experienced logger and I cut a tree just right and it falls wrong, and I get—" His voice caught, and he couldn't continue. "I'm sorry." "No, answer me. Tell me the answer." "Dad was doing his best. He had a wife and kid to support. He wasn't drinking or doing drugs. That tree just flipped back at him and pinned him." Guy took a deep breath. "And when the people came for him later, they heard the chainsaw still sputtering in the forest." "I don't have the answer," I said helplessly. "You don't have the answer?" "No, I don't." Then you're a fool to believe in a God like that. No, I'm not. Prove it. I suddenly sat up and got face to face with him. I knew where I stood. Okay, I'll prove it. We sat there staring at each other. Go ahead, he said. This'll hurt. His lips tightened. Hurt me then, if that's what it takes. Remember when I found the sketchbook in the London bus? Yeah. The person I suspected of stealing it, I said in a level voice, was you. His chin sagged and his eyes got big and tragic. Me? I nodded, blinking back my tears, but still looking him in the eyes. I suspected you. He swallowed and began to blink rapidly himself. Really? Yeah, I almost sobbed. Now I know what you meant by hurting me. He took a shuddery breath. But why? Don't you know me better than that? I had to work it through, I said. I really had to work it through. My mind was too full of the means, motive, opportunity thing. I figured you were the only one who could have known about what was in my sketchbook. I figured you were a practical joker, and I knew you had a gripe against God, so I. He leaned forward, grabbed desperately at my wrist. But Mark, don't you know me better than that? I put my face in my hands and burst into childish sobs. For a while I could only nod. Then I gulped a couple of times and said, I I had to work it through, Guy. Logic told me one thing, but I had to think back on what I knew about you. And finally I said to myself, because of what I know about Guy, I'm going to take it on faith that he's not guilty. And I went right over to the Mother Brown's phone booth and called you. He got up and went to my window, but I knew that he wasn't looking out. He just stood there. After a long time, he came back to the desk. I get it. You've proved it. Good. I look at God and logic tells me one thing, but I've got to think about all I know about him and take it on faith that he's on my side. That's it, Guy. But I don't know him that well, he said in a dazed voice. Not like you do. Guess that's why I don't trust him. No problem. We'll soon fix that. And then, for the very first and only time in our lives, Guy and I shook hands. And then we stared at our clues again. Well, let me get out the old Sherlock Holmes magnifying glass again, I said briskly, and we'll look at them up close. You dropped that little paper, Guy said. Where? There on the floor. I stooped down and picked it up. I don't know why I put it in my pocket in the first place. Better check it out, he said. For one thing, it's not just an ordinary piece of paper. It's torn on three sides. I shrugged. So? When people tear paper into small pieces, it's usually because they want to get rid of something written on it. There's nothing written on this, I said, studying it on all sides. But wait, I brought my head, the paper, and the lens closer to the gooseneck lamp. Hey, Guy, what? This is computer paper. He bent toward it and squinted. You're right. I can see the perforations. Here, give me that banner fragment. None of Cammy's samples matched with it. Let's see if this paper does. In the white light of the lamp, I focused the lens on them. They matched perfectly. I said, the perforations match perfectly. Suddenly, I was on my feet. Guy, let's go. Where? To the center. Why? Just follow me, and let's hope we're not too late. As we dashed downstairs through the book stacks, I squeaked to a stop and pointed silently at the white card at the end of the shelf on which we'd found the occult books. The card said religion and philosophy. Jean Horton's car was parked in front of the center. Our Nike shoes slapped the sidewalk 4 or 5 times, and then we were on the porch and in through the front door. Mrs. Horton stared at us, mouth opened. I raced by her and up the stairs, Guy following me. I burst into the men's clothing room. The plywood's down, Guy panted. I knelt at the opening of the dark passageway. Come out, I said gently. You can come out now. After a long silence, there was a scuffling sound, and the ghost's white face of Sheila Stanford appeared, smudged with dust. She tried to smile at me, but couldn't. Hi, Krug, she finally said in a tiny, trembly voice.